trust me, I get it. You're feeling the pressure to keep your faith separate from your work, worried that pursuing your God-given dreams might be seen as selfish or misguided. Here's what I've discovered. Our faith isn't a liability in our leadership. As a matter of fact, it's the source of our strength and wisdom. The real challenge is navigating how to boldly pursue our purpose while staying anchored in our faith. And that's exactly what the Beacon Show is all about. Each week, we bring you biblical wisdom and practical strategies from true beacons, Christian leaders who are illuminating the world. And it's also that you can let your light shine brighter and brighter. I'm Tamara Jackson, and this is The Beacon Show. From the vibrant heart of South Africa to the global stage of ministry, my friend Jean Symons' journey is certainly a testament to the power of vision, faith, and leadership. As the team leader of Doxa Deo, Jean stands at the helm of a movement that is literally reshaping cities across continents. Now, he was born into the complex apartheid-era South Africa, and his story is one that mirrors the dramatic changes of his homeland. From a young boy with a passion for music to now a visionary leader pursuing citywide transformation, John's path has been marked by bold decisions, unwavering commitment, and a deep-seated desire to see God's kingdom manifest in the urban landscapes of our world. So today, we dive into the mind of a man who's not just pastoring a church, but facilitating a symphony of change across 27 campuses in 11 cities. John shares with us his insights on leadership, the challenges of taking the baton from a founding visionary, and the audacious goal of seeing entire cities transformed by the power of faith in action. Prepare to be challenged, inspired, and perhaps even changed as we explore the life and vision of Jean Symons, a man who dares to dream on a citywide scale. Enjoy. John, welcome to the Beacon Show, where wisdom meets faith and success finds its voice. I am so grateful that you made time in your busy schedule to be here with us today. Thank you so much.
I'm excited to have this conversation with you, and it is great to meet you when we met in Charlotte in Waxhaw. Excited about our conversation.
Yeah, it's kind of a small world, right? Like we're literally on completely different sides of the world right now, but at a moment in time, I'm thankful that God orchestrated that moment where we could connect, and now we're connecting across the miles through the power of technology.
Yeah.
John, this is a great opportunity for our listening audience to hear from someone that may have a very different background and experiences than they do. Today, most of our interviews have been with leaders that are here in the States. And so I think this is going to be really great to be able to have a different perspective and to look at things perhaps more globally through the work that you do in the Doxa Deo ministry. But before we get into those nitty-gritty details, I'd love to give our listening and viewing audience a little glimpse into your life as a person. So can you take us back to John as a little boy? What was it like growing up for you? I'm always curious as to how people kind of got their start.
Yeah, no, I'd like to tell a story, but just quickly on a lighter note, we've got a province in South Africa that's called the Free State. So, you've got the states and we've got the Free State, so I can relate maybe. So anyway, now I was born in 68, and that happened in one of the eastern suburbs of Johannesburg. And I'm the oldest of exactly 5 children. So I grew up in a big family. Our native language is Afrikaans. It's got some Dutch roots in it. But obviously here in South Africa, that was obviously in the apartheid season. So I grew up as one of the privileged white people in South Africa. And my family at that point, very involved in church. We typically would say that we grew up in church because, in a small Pentecostal church, everybody is at the church building every single day for a different reason. Yeah. And, so that's just how we grew up. At first, my parents were quite poor. They were very young when I was born. But after that, my dad started a business and we moved out of the city to a beautiful place next to a big lake called the Hartbeespoort Dam. Let's not talk about what's a lake and what's a dam in South Africa. It's different to your place. And when I went to high school, still very involved in church. We were part of a church plant when I was about 13 years old. And for me, that's when God really became a personal reality for me. I think that just the personal understanding of God's presence, the revelation of Christ and so on happened to me when I was 13 and 14 on a camp for high school kids. It revolutionized my life. In the next year, I sensed a call to full-time ministry. So the other thing that you need to know about me is that I've got a sport and hunting crazy father, hunting, fishing, sport, everything. So our family, I'm the oldest of 4 boys and 1 girl. So we're a very, very active family, and we did all of that outdoor stuff ever since I can remember. I still love it. But my mother brought the music side. Every one of us had to learn a different instrument. I started playing trumpet when I was about 7 years old. And as the other kids got instruments, I learned all of those instruments. It was in proximity. It was in the house. So what happened to me then at that age of 13 and 14, I started engaging in worship leading. And that became my career. I became a pastor, a worship pastor. But we'll talk about a little bit more about that part of our life. So grew up as one of the privileged children in Africa, in South Africa, and really sensed that God gave me a mission when I was about 14 years old. Let me just pause there. Are there questions that some of the stuff that you're wondering about?
Wow, so many. Now, one thing that I've heard you say a couple of times, which may be perhaps a new concept or maybe something that our audience has heard but doesn't really understand. You said that you grew up as privileged. Talk to me about what that means. What do you mean when you say that, and how did that translate into everyday life?
So the Afrikaans speaking minority in South Africa was in governance and in government and ruled the nation. And if you were born in a family like that, you typically would have parents that normally would have done better than Black parents, for instance, business-wise. And it meant that we were richer, and I had more opportunities, like I said, in terms of quality schooling and all of those. It was radically different if you were born, maybe not just as a Black person, but that if you were born in a poor family. So my parents were poor, but they had the opportunity with education and everything to work themselves up to a place of influence and success. And it was a journey for us through all of the apartheid discoveries. When you grow up in something, you get used to things that you think is normal, and then later on started discovering some of the pain and the brokenness behind that. And today, obviously, we are positioned in a very, very fantastic, neutral, integrated ministry and lifestyle, where none of that apartheid, I want to call it rubbish, because some of it was. None of it is a part of my life because of my discovery of how God created every human soul with dignity and so on. So we're working hard to rectify, and I think the country is doing really well. There's a concept here that we call the rainbow nation, the beauty of unity within the diversity. And I think when it comes to leadership, even just to marriage, if you want to stay married to the same person, you better understand what unity looks like within tremendous diversity. Okay, let me pause there again. Does it make it clear? Do you understand what I'm talking about?
Yeah, no, that's very, very clear and tremendously helpful. And I can only imagine what it was like you said, just kind of growing up in that environment, you didn't fully realize the difference in the experience. But then as you grew up, you started getting exposed to different things. And I wonder how that shaped you as a leader, just when you started to realize that there is a difference in the experience and the opportunities. How did that personally start to shape you? Let's go back to, that 13, 14-year-old time in your life when you were trying to kind of step into that role as leadership. Do you think it had an impact on how you approached worship, ministry, leadership, and pastoring?
Yeah, I definitely did, because obviously then in 94, when voting rights were given to Black people for the first time in South Africa, then the whole demographic, the whole of everything that you did started to change. I mean, you won't even believe what I'm saying maybe now, but, public toilets, there were signs, whites only, on some of the public toilets. Today, if you talk to somebody about that, it sounds so foreign because our culture and our nation is integrated. Nothing is perfect, but we've come a long way. So personally, you had to make up your mind on how you're going to position yourself towards this. So as a teenager, we were comfortable. And other people, they were going through their story. But then the moment that you engage ministry, now let me tell you as an example, when I went to theological college, we had a different theological college for every race in South Africa. Wow. So you went to the Black college or the Indian college or the colored college, or to those with the terminology that was used at that point. I was in the white college. And then you begin to engage people and leaders. That was in my 20s, really for the first time, because it wasn't needed. We lived in a very secluded society. You at your place where you stay, I stay in my place, and we don't really interact with each other. But that changed in my 20s. And like I said, I think today, if you ask how did it shape my leadership, I think that every one of us must learn how to celebrate our ethnicity, to celebrate our origins. And then secondly, also to acknowledge that every ethnic group does have some kind of blind spots, and we're not perfect. And the complement of my life is in engaging the beauty of another ethnic group, engaging the beauty of the others, of people's other mindedness, of how they think, of how they live, how their habits and how everything. And when those ethnic beautiful elements begin to complement each other, then you see something powerful. Let me remind you that Jesus had an incredible capacity with his 12 disciples to bring opposites together.
That's good.
Without them changing who they are, they found commonality. And if there's common purpose, then there's unity. So if you're asking how it shaped me, I think we need to acknowledge, I'm sitting here, I'm a white, middle-aged male. That's who I am. By the way, percentage-wise, we are declining. So that's not just in South Africa, globally. And I'm perceived in a certain way because of that. So I need to come to terms with the fact that people think about me with certain prejudices, and then come and address that and say, okay, give me a chance. Let me tell you what Jesus did in my life. Let me tell you how my discovery of the love of God, God so loved the world, go and make disciples of all nations. There's so many scriptures to that, that showed me that my worldview that I assimilated from my ethnic background did not match the worldview of God revealed through his son, Jesus Christ. And then I always tell people, I'm not a Symons in the first instance. I'm a Christ follower in the first instance. So you need to find your identity in your true origin, and that is that my Father in heaven is really my Father. And my parents, I love them. They're still alive, and and I love what they did and how they gave so many blessings to my life. My Afrikaans background brought many blessings to my life, but it doesn't define my future. My future is defined, my reality about who I am, how I lead, what I do is defined by my commitment to Jesus Christ.
Amen. Amen. I love that. So you started to step into various leadership roles. Walk us through kind of the progression. So it sounds like you started out leading worship. What did it look like as your leadership experience grew? Can you kind of baby step us through how that journey went for you?
Yeah, I think a very interesting thing for me is, if I look back, I ended up in leadership roles when I was 11 years old and 12 years old. But I, at that point, didn't know that people were seeing leadership in me at school, on the sports field, and so on. The same thing happened in a high school. Then you go and you study to become a pastor, and you start to get exposed to leadership material that I really wasn't interested in high school. I was just doing hunting and fishing and studying a little bit. No, I was doing quite well academically and everything. So you were doing what children do, but then at some point, ending up in leadership, you just got the responsibility to now lead. And I think for me, if I now look back, if I can fast forward today, I always love to tell people that leading is an art form. I play the piano, so let me use that as an example, and then I'll go back to the baby steps. It's one thing to read notes from a piece of paper and to press certain of the notes on the piano, and some people can call that playing the piano. But when somebody brings artistic expression, where the personality of the Liberace, if some of you are old enough to remember who that was,
I do.
brought personality to the instrument. Leading is exactly the same thing. I think leading is very personal. It's influenced by your personality. So if I go back then, I started leading worship, not just playing in the band, but there was that desire to lead and to sing. I wasn't very good at in high school.
No.
But then ended up in some instances where nobody put up their hand to take responsibility when I was in college for the choir. So I'll do it. And was the choir leader in our theological college. Ended up doing well with my studies and beginning to realize, when I got my first job as a pastor, as a worship pastor, I was 22 years old. And I knew nothing about leadership, but God blessed me to be in a ministry where our leader at that point, by the way, Alan was the youth pastor of that church when I became the worship pastor. Yeah, Alan Platt, who's the father and leader of our whole movement. And anyway, so then you do your thing. I led the department that I was leading, and at some point you begin to realize that more people are joining in comparison to others. And my exposure to a church where there was a value towards the concept of leadership. In many other churches, they were leading just from a pastoral paradigm. But this particular movement, so if I summarize it, I think I bumped into opportunities. I was pulled into opportunities. I end up in an environment where leadership, there was an appetite for leadership. And I thank God for that. I think He directed my path to be exposed to that. And then obviously I started realizing that when I read leadership material, John Maxwell was the flavor of the month in South Africa at that point, and I would go to that conference and it would just resonate. So then you feel that somebody's helping you with vocabulary for what you instinctively do, and suddenly I can articulate it. And now I can hone it a little bit more so that I can reproduce it. And maybe let me then lastly on that question. So I ended up on Alan Platt's team about 9 years later. When we started our third campus, me and my wife joined here in Pretoria in South Africa, the capital city, and we were leading worship. And about 2 years later, we were at a very, very incredibly important T-junction where Alan, as my leader, saw potential in me. And he asked the question, John, are you going to continue to specialize in the arts and worship? Or do you see God calling you to become the leader, the campus pastor? It was a big, big, big challenge for me, because if you, for a decade or two, you were going in a particular direction, and now somebody is asking a question for a change of direction, and I sensed in that season that God said to me, it's time for change. So I stepped into the leadership boots in ministry, and also grew through that, still have the opportunity to do lots of what I love about the arts and the performing arts and so on. But I think I've discovered, if I now look back, that has been my journey actually the whole time. Some of the other things were instruments in my life. So I think to every leader, I do want to say, turn around and go back to when you were 10 and 11 and 12 years, and take every 3 to 5 years and ask the question, what shaped you in those 3 to 5 years? It will give you a good indication to what is important and how God has brought you to where you are now, and also answer some of the questions as you go forward. It feels that I'm talking a little bit too much, Tamara.
No. You're doing great. I love it. I love your thorough answers, and you're blessing our audience. So please don't worry. One of the things that I heard in you sharing, John, is an openness to opportunities, because even when you talked about your experience, I think it was the choir where no one was taking responsibility, is how you positioned it, which I think is pivotal. There are moments in life where everybody's looking around, right? Like, who's going to do it? And you were willing to say, hey, if no one else is going to do it, I will do it so that this mission can move forward. Talk to us about the importance of being open. I want to hear your perspective on that. Why is that so critical for us as leaders?
It's a big question. And I've got 4 or 5 things that I want to say at the same time now. So where do I start? I think one of the discoveries that I've made is that some people have an attitude that I want to summarize with the word why. So I think the opposite to that is a why not attitude. You know, so many people, for whatever reason, are afraid, or whatever the reason is, to experiment a little bit into new opportunities and new directions. But I think the why not, you know, so if an opportunity comes, just start with why not. You're not deciding yet. Just allow the Germans have a term that they call Lebensraum. It is allow space, oxygen in your mind to consider the options. Obviously, within a godly definition of what is good and right. That's I'm not saying allow when you want to rob a bank, allow the why not thought.
No, we're not
in
doing
your
that.
mind. That's not where we're going. So I think that's one. The second one is, I cannot talk about this without referencing the impact that the story of Joseph in the scriptures had on my life. A young person who ended up in circumstances where everything was against him. And here's my question. What caused Joseph to end up from there as a slave with no privileges, nothing? He ended up where Potiphar said, I entrust you with everything that I have, except my wife. I entrust you with everything. And Potiphar said something that stirred my young heart as a pastor. He said, Joseph, since you came into my house, the blessing of your God is on my house. So I want to, secondly, the why not is the first one. The second response is, I think, faithfulness with what is in your hand. Let me say something. As a leader, I teach young people, God cannot promote unfaithfulness. The story that Jesus told about the talents and those words, well done, good and faithful servant, steward. Over little you were faithful, I will promote, I will lift you up. And I've always had this desire that I would be found faithful, that my father would say that over my life. John, you were faithful in the little. And I'm telling people today that opportunity always will cross the path of those who are diligent. If you are remaining faithful and you're doing, so I think Joseph, maybe one day somebody stuck a broom in his hand and said, let's wipe some floors. And maybe Joseph did it at a level of commitment where he could not be ignored. So I think that's a second big discussion. And maybe there's a lot more, but let me pause there for now.
Yeah, no, that's so good, right? And as you were walking through the example of Joseph and its impact on your life, it's something that I've thought about often too, right? Like literally overnight, Joseph was in a completely different position. And to the point that you made, it seems like it was overnight, the transition, but the work was happening for years. His faithfulness, his obedience, his willingness to do what was in front of him. And I think that's a blessing for our viewing and listening audience. If you are looking for promotion, if you're looking for more impact, more influence, it starts with being faithful with what is in front of you. And I heard you say doing it at a level of commitment, I think is the word you use, that you can't be ignored. So I want to talk a little bit about commitment, John. When you say that word, what does commitment mean to you, and what does it look like as a leader?
Unfortunately, and I just love the way that Alan puts this question. He says, you need to answer this question: who is your master? Who is your master? We would say in South Africa, but in the US, who's your master? Unfortunately, I think many leaders are not in a healthy place where God really is the master of my life, of my desires. So I would say that commitment is the byproduct of a genuine love for God. To put him first, to have a desire that he would smile over my life. I think you will be tested in many ways where you get to a point where pleasure or comfort or people or money or other things want to lord it over you, want to rule over your mind and your decisions. So if you wake up in the morning and you know what I'm doing today is either going to honor him or not, that changes the way that you make decisions. And that's the part about Joseph that gripped me. It is very clear that his commitment was not to Potiphar or to the prison or to Pharaoh. His commitment was to his creator. It was to his God. So for me, I am loyal to my organization, but I'm committed to my Father in heaven. And I want to live out a testimony where people will look at my life and will be influenced by the fact that I'm working for the Lord. I am employed by Doxa Deo, but I don't work for Doxa Deo. I work for the Lord. And I think Paul understood that in how he captured that in some of his letters. So I think we can say so much more about it, but let's start there. Every leader, go and look at your diary, your time. Go and look at your treasure, your money. Where is it going? Go and look at your talents. Time, treasure, and talents. Those are the three, I think, summaries of resources in our lives. And ask the question, am I really serving God with that? So I think today, if I can fast forward, I have the honor and the privilege of taking over the visionary leadership from Alan, the father, and Liana, his wife. Me and my wife had a public event last year in October where we took over, and you can look at the recording. The very first thing that I said that day is, guys, I am here to serve God's mission for this organization. I understand stewardship. If he puts responsibility in my hand, my greatest honor is not that people will look at me and say, wow. My greatest honor will be that people will say, well done, good and faithful servant, that they will see that God is my master. I see so many other leaders. We've got a big ministry. We've got a big movement. We have a lot of different ministry units that is spread out over 4 continents and 12 different cities. And there's no need in my heart for my name to be written all over everything. The personal honor is not my biggest motivation. It's my spiritual honor, the honor. How can people pray, our Father who's in heaven, hallowed be your name? How can they pray that and not understand the implication that his name comes first? His honor comes first. The way that I do my marriage, the way that I do my parenting, the way that I do my work, the way that I speak, the way that I preach, the way that everything is either glorifying God or not. So commitment for me is a byproduct. And then let me end this with just one of the biggest discoveries that I've made is when you really love somebody, then it's easy to sacrifice for them. You know, when I fell in love with Viliana, we were very young and we had no money and no nothing, but we sacrificed to be together. You know, you make a lot of effort. And that's what I've discovered. Commitment is a byproduct of passion. When you are passionate about something, then you are willing to give time, treasure, and talents towards that. So I think I'll pause there for now.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I'm curious about, you talked about how Alan saw something in you and challenged you to step into a bigger vision that up until that point you didn't see. You accepted the challenge, and now you are taking the baton, if you will, from the founder of Doxa Deo. Talk to us about the human side of that. Was there any questioning? Was there any concern on your part of, hey, I'm taking the baton from the founder. Can I really do this? Did you have to wrestle with any of that, or were you instantly confident as you stepped into this new role?
If you're confident, when you step up to a new plate, then you shouldn't be there. No, I think there has to be self-belief that you are confident. I think, let me go to David, another role model in the scriptures for me. When he walked up to Goliath, he said these words. He says, you come against me with this and this and this, but I come against you in the name of the Lord of hosts. And the God who delivered me from the lion and the bear is going to deliver you into my hands today. So what I read into that, and if you, on the human side, the uncertainty and the fear and so on, am I going to be good enough? Will I be able to do this? I think is healthy. It's healthy because what it does is humility is a gift in leadership. Oh my word, humility is a gift in leadership. And if you think too much of yourself, then you're not open to leadership to speak into your life. You're not reaching out to people around you to make you stronger. So one of the things that already is a legacy, people are quoting this back to me. They're saying, John, what we experience from you is that from the word go, when I started taking over some of the dimensions that Alan was leading, and now we have to say, what's my title? So he's got a title. What's my title? I always prefer to say I lead the team who leads Doxa Deo. That by implication is saying I can't do this. I think any individual standing before your master who knows that you cannot do this. I cannot do this on my own. Lord, I need you. I need people. That's healthy. And I think that's where things go wrong in leadership, is when some of us do get to a point where we think we've got this. Where Paul, again, and please, people, read your Bibles and listen to what he says. He says, be careful if you think that you are standing, that you don't also fall down. So the humility of knowing, even though I am strong, I have to remind myself and constantly position myself dependent on God, dependent on my team, dependent on people. But I do want to tell you, I remember when Alan asked me to lead the city of Pretoria. I think there were 9 campuses at that point, and a couple of weeks or months down the road, he asked me, how are you doing? Are you okay? And he checked in with me and everything. And I said to him, and when I look back today, that was so true. I said, Alan, I know I am neglecting stuff because this thing is too big for me.
Big.
I'm just not sure that I'm neglecting the right stuff. So that shows you the human side of it. Later on, I discovered that how the Holy Spirit really was with me in decision making. That's my deepest prayer. If anybody ever wanted to pray for me, I would say, Lord, I need more wisdom. If you look at the gift of wisdom that Solomon received, I think that Christ has become our wisdom. And wisdom is what I'm talking about now. So on the human side, you're asking me, I didn't feel insecure because of my calling. There were elements in my past where I sensed God has said this in my past. I remember a prophecy when I was 12 years old. My mother came back from a prayer meeting and somebody saw a vision of me with a bag of golden seed over my shoulder, and I'm throwing out seed to the nations. My mother said to a 12-year-old boy, you are going to have an impact on nations. And I never told anybody. I just said, Lord, Joseph ended up in a bad spot because he shared his dream. I'm not going to share my dream. But when those moments then come where you realize, oh yes, my calling, God's making room for that calling, and then you position yourself in humility and say, I cannot do this on my own. I'm going to stay in dependency. I'm going to build a team. Let's make it a us and not a I. We're a body, the body of Christ. I'm just one of the members of his body. He's the head. I've got an important role. I'm not going to shy back. I will lead the team, but I will not lead if there's no team. I'm going to empower people. I'm going to take people on this journey with me. I think those are some of the discoveries that if I look around me, I see people making mistakes in that regard. And then let me just tell you that I did burn out at some point. I praise God, it didn't go as far as physical, but it was emotional burnout. Just the human side of it got to a point where I realized what this is asking of me is more than I'm not just willing, it's more than I actually can give.
That's good.
But I thank the Lord in that year, it was in 2020, at the end of 25, into 26. If I today look back, the Lord intervened. He got me to certain things that I experienced. I did a couple of leadership courses that revolutionized my life and my mind, and my capacity exploded. because of that renewal that happened. So I'm telling people, if you come to the end of yourself, it's a great place to be. Bill Hybels spoke about this when he said that, frustration often precedes new vision. So when you get to a point of frustration, ask the Lord, what is the new thing that he wants to do there? So I'm going to start preaching now.
You were getting ready to go into it. It's good. No. It's a blessing. I'm curious now that you've maybe settled into your role a little bit more at Doxa Deo, and you're leading this great team of individuals. What is the vision for the future of Doxa Deo? Can you talk to us a little bit about where you see your team making an impact?
Yeah, so I think that is one of the things where I thank God for Alan. He's a fantastic articulator. His gift to bring clarity to who we are and what we do. And over the last season, he's given us so much that we can take forward. We're taking responsibility for that now, and we will continue to sharpen the focus of the vision. So the vision is very clear. It's the influence of the presence of God in a city to the extent that Habakkuk 2 verse 14 will realize that the knowledge of the glory of the Lord, our name Doxa Deo, it captures that desire, that the knowledge of his glory would flood a city, that the positive experience, the positive transformative presence of God through his people, that's the obvious implication, is that the quality of family life, the quality of business, the quality of spirituality, the quality of education, all of what's happening in a city, that's our desire. We want to be instruments in seeing his kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. The presence, the person, and the purposes of Christ revealed in society. And when you say that, that means this is a big task. We will not be able to do it on our own. So I do want to make this very clear that on one of our retreats, I was actually in Disney with Alan in 1 December. And we were doing a couple of wonderful things there. And in our time together, this became so clear for me that I think a question that a leader must ask yourself is, what am I building? What am I? If you're asking me about the future, I want to change the question a little bit and saying, what are you building in your future? I'm 55 years old now. 10 years from now, I will hand over the leadership of Doxa Deo to a next generation, as it was handed over to us from the first founding generation. We're going to a third generation of leadership. So if you think about those implications, what are you building? If you're 70 and 80 years old and you look back, what will remain standing? What have you built? And I think when God speaks, he always speaks in threes. I hope you guys catch some of the lighter notes and the jokes that we love. If he speaks to Alan, it starts with the same letter. So
he's got it down, huh?
I built three things. My future, the legacy that I want to leave, is when I look back 2 or 3 decades from now, I want to see individuals. That's the first thing that we are building. We are building individuals. We want to raise up people to be city changers. The second thing that we're building is organizations. We are building churches and nonprofits and businesses, kingdom businesses. We run about 60 some organizations like that now. And we want to continue to do that. And then, because we realize that if you want to transform a city, you can't do it on your own. You have to build ecosystems. So the way that we love to put it is missional individuals missional communities, and missional ecosystems. So if you ask me about the future, I would love to see a lot more individuals in our world being raised up to represent Christ's mission in their world. I would love to see many more organizations that serve the mission of Christ in society. And I would love to see powerful ecosystems of churches and businesses and educational institutions, etc., nonprofits, that take hands together for the mission of Christ, the establishing of the values of the kingdom in their world. So we've got a city transformation vision, we've got a Christ-centered focus, and we're in those three elements. It's a bit broad, and it can be a little bit theoretical, but practically 10 and 20 years from now, I want to look back and I want to see healthy individuals who are leaders in society. I want to see organizations that are flourishing for the purposes of Christ. And I want to see communities changed because of relationships in the cities where we're engaged.
Well, as you've said, John, it's a big mission that you all are on at Doxa Deo. I got to believe that there are leaders that are watching us or listening to us right now that are also facing a big mission that may seem somewhat impossible on some levels. What piece of advice would you give to a leader that's in that place right now?
I think there could be so many answers to that question, but let me take you back to one season in my life where I really felt I was putting in so much effort and I wasn't seeing the kind of return and fruit. Got a little despondent, and at one of our staff gatherings, Alan quoted, now if I remember correctly, it was Plato who said this. So you can go and Google it and get the correct quote. But,
Right.
you know, after so many years that I quoted it, I'm now going to say, as I am always saying, although I think we got it from somebody else at first, listen to this statement. Little things done in a single direction will always achieve greatness. I think the flywheel concept that Jim Collins in the book Good to Great explains it beautifully. If you just keep on doing the right things in the right direction, at some point it will bring momentum. And I think, you know, you look at other ministries and other organizations in their season of momentum, and then you want to compare yourself with them. And that's why Good to Great may be a fantastic book to go and read about this, because they studied organizations that outperformed their competitors for 15 years. And I think, you know, some of those influences helped me personally. If I wanted to give one piece of advice, is make sure you're doing the right things. Do it in the right direction and keep on doing it. And I believe that God will bring forth the fruit that He has birthed inside of you. There's so many other things that I can say, but that would be my encouragement. It helped me through a difficult time.
I love that. It's perfect. Final thought, John, you've talked about the legacy that you want to leave through your work at Doxa Deo. I'd like to now challenge you to think personally, is there anything else that you would add to the list when all is said and done? When people think about Jean Symons as the individual, what do you want them to remember about you?
We love Hebrews 13, verse 7, where it says, consider your leaders, study your leaders, focus, listen, watch. And then he talks about three gifts that you received from your leaders. And I think that would be my personal desire. Number one, listen to the word of God that they brought to you. I would love for people to talk about me and how I facilitated God's voice in their life. Help them to understand the fullness of the message of the gospel of Christ. It's the weight of the message of Christ. The second thing is not just listen to the word that they brought, but assimilate and allow their faith to stir faith in your heart. I think the journey of really trusting and believing God and see mountains moved through my life, I would love to stir up that kind of faith in other people, that they would say, John brought us a faith. And then the third dimension to me is surprising, that it talks about considering the outcome of their lives. Just the way that I live, that would inspire people, that I'm not, this big topic of the gospel, this massive topic about faith is put in comparison to the quality of my life, the quality of how healthy and happy I am, how good my marriage is doing. I just don't think that leaders realize that people have a desire for God's message, God's voice. They have a desire for faith that will move mountains, but they have a desire for role models that they can look up to and see that you're living as a natural person, but you're in partnership with a supernatural God, and consider the outcome of a well-spent life is what the Amplified Bible says. So please go and look at Hebrews 13:7. I think you'll see some of the desires of my personal journey there.
John, so much wisdom. I know that you're continuing to pray for wisdom, as we all need to, but you've shared so many great nuggets of wisdom with our viewing and listening audience today. I just want to thank you for spending your time and pouring out your heart and giving us all some things to really pray about, and ask God to lead us forward. And I want to continue to wish you and the entire team and organization at Doxa Deo continued success. And we'll make sure that our viewing and listening audience has all the links to get in contact with Doxa Deo and learn more about what, as an organization, you are doing, as well as how to stay connected with you. And we'll have to have you back in the future to see what God has done since we last spoke. So again, we wish you God's best, John. Thank you for being here.
Appreciate, and I hope my accent didn't confuse some of the discussions.
No, I can hear you
God
loud
bless
and
you.
clear. God bless you too.
Thanks, Tamara.